Hello, Americans. There are things that are recorded that would liberate everyone, our countries, every A through Z, which show means to settle things, to make security long lasting. In other words, but offensively, the names of the people of the sciences, including of the law, they have predicate acts with facts methods, then they're speaking about crimes anyway, the way the breaching method knew they would. There is a witch trials place next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, the American founding locations had other communicated. Then our founders left to classify for themselves for us to understand. And the only founder that we know the name of is James Madison. Everyone was supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington or allow others to be. It would have gotten through you guys' delusions too. No one had free speech. George Washington was counter-extorting with James Madison's plan. Therefore, he was counter-extorted too, forced to become an American president / chief and help them. In other words, I don't know if he was part of the plan or what, but their plan was to force everyone at key locations, northern colonies and southern colonies, and there were more than 13. And they had slavery even entrenched. Rather than connecting to that, to why and how the North and South had roles with slavery, they were only allowed to be slave roles. Sickly, distinctly hurt and hurting others. And everyone had measured and maintained roles, not just by internationally monitored conversations. There were roles with it, sickly, distinctly, but sickly, non-distinctly, even with slavery, even replacing with black pupils, white survivors communicate. Right through administrations, the FBI directors, plural, have collusion /S with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with other countries. All these countries fighting in the news, Russians in Ukraine, they increasingly have wire and mail crimes with Harper Hospital, drugs and medicines crimes with them, identity theft, fraud, slanders, increasingly a Leahy family, and people named Lombardo tied to a Cololo house and a Smith house near me. And they're bringing this up. I try to do it, and in the background, you guys don't want privacy. They're lying too when they want privacy. They're using the truths for lies. Right in the newspaper, the WTNH has sources putting fake ties to me, bringing their kids into the organized crimes with them. An O'Neill family, and they have little kids involved with Whiting forensics too, and a Joshua Julian, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by intelligence near me, involved with him, and he verified it on Facebook. These collusions with planting evidence on my street and with Facebook, with the Wethersfield Police Department, too, as Joshua Schumack, involved already with the intelligence family collusions with all natures of organized crimes. And child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first force, medical and sexual offenders of kids force. They have all kinds of medicines crimes with the interbranch family members mixed with the foreign, the extended family members of probate court judges, and tied with the same house /S, increasingly involved with falsified police reports. Some Mendez police have collusion /S with their educators. I never had a class with them, with identity theft, fraud, slanders at my campuses. And as roles with, I caught them with a principal child abuser and the older police Mendez brother. Faked, I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He faked conversation with me at the police station too as an adult, and forced Saudis to collusions with him with that. And a Phil Collo was one confessed involved with multiple falsified police reports they used for the same arrest. They put a charge but no writing, and then they stack on predicate acts with facts in databases, fake transcripts, evidences as collusions with all natures of crime scenes that they already had interbranch. And then further, as their roles with organized crimes and organized crimes methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders, instances relative, with the names next to the state and conjunctive to the state corrections offices and the judicial branch offices. Wethersfield police have wire crime acts and methods in Wethersfield Pizza House with a Steven Stocco and a Maria Pizzino. I never saw Maria Pizzino on a campus in my life. I never had a word of conversation with Steven Stocco in my life. He was in one class with me, and they put my neighbor in that class. And they put a Paul Zano to make a fake exception. The only class I ever had with him. He's increasingly a Paul Zano has people. I never had a class with him in grammar school or middle school. Never even saw him around the middle school. He's in the background with people putting fake things, fake ties, fake nature ties to me. And then people come up and tell me that. And I don't even know those people. They time you at corners with this. Increasingly, these are people involved with the name Kalo and tomorrow. So they have a cousin named Scalora. People with the name Scalora are involved with them with the court next to the World Trade Center towers the night before the World Trade Center attack. And their roles with the court next to it and spots and people at the World Trade Center with predicate acts, with identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts, collusion slash us, also with the networks. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack, while I caught them forcing child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, with families involved with that years apart. Increasingly, New Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices, and like those Elm Streets, who are increasingly intercities, a bunch of students and adults at Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University. Trinity College is in Hartford, Connecticut. Students and adults planted evidences with a bunch of people tied to the same house, with their extended family member named Phil Kalo, further involved with the principal upskirt nature. That I recorded involved with worse child abuses than that, and their roles with these Mendez police, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police reports, police forms switching and forging names, refusing to identify themselves legitimately. Every year, intercities more and more since before the World Trade Center attack. Before the World Trade Center attack, people associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members have roles with predicate acts and requests for help by foreign and domestic military, people associated. The foreign military. The domestic, Eric Burgess has roles with Amy or Emily with Hartford courts, and they have roles with an Officer Hunter, but he might be faking his name. He has also roles along Park Street with a Daryl Sullivan and people with Alina's Pizza and like a tiki bar there, and their roles with Lance Cuddy, who one of the leaders of the kids' child abusers confessed was involved with them with that, and with the principal child abuser, and FBI Director Robert Luskin, and former mayors from Wethersfield, increasingly a Mayor Gold, in conjunctions to him and his family and their neighbors, have roles with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders. In other words, his daughter pretended to know me by timing where I was going to be and be yelling all these things, then put fake thing in database. In other words. So increasingly, I don't know what they can't get out to paper, and they know that because it's recorded that they've been speaking about crimes anyway. These are high criminals. This preaching method showed them how to think. You guys have replaced what our founders communicated for you. A through Z at campuses sickly distinctly. Just like sickly distinctly, the North and the South both had roles even with slavery, even replacing what nature itself communicates with Black people's white lies, when nature itself is not criminal insidiousness nature. It even shows us that. It shows us when we are using systems tactical ulterior from the one, and when it's also positive onto itself, as what's generating totally different individual species bodies, made up each one of a whole bunch of individual bodies, just like humanity. Humanity is a human species body made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies. All group differences are about what's generating not just our species, because we didn't invent how there are totally different species bodies. Even if we invented a new species, we're going by its system. And it demonstrates when we're using systems not further positive onto itself. And every identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. So they have the nature of the debate contains quality aspects in nature, aspects in nature /s, like wrongdoers, wrongdoing, self-value, when people are making convictions by the principles of American history about ancient history. It's history. The names of the sciences, the beginning of the Old Testament says, only defend right here. Now, this is not to put faith or anything. This is about what the book says per science. It says only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. Now, that's before the part even with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In other words, in the Adam and Eve story, all that. We're not supposed to defend that. It says only defend right here with names. People don't even know about that part because people, in other words, too. These people, oh, you're saying something prejudice against this religion. Offensively, the people use their own differences and other people's differences. What is recorded to hide lie progressions. They're forcing things like racism or prejudice, pretended belief by themselves, so they could keep such things, replacing what our founders communicated about the scientific value of the human fact, human nature breaching method that had been entrenched, and all had only been allowed roles with it, even with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies, and then America's founders were born. Through our schools, the people who attack our founders, who attack the schools and our founders, and the people trying to defend them, but they're defending them the way they shouldn't. They're as collusions /yes, they're a fake difference. They're an array, and all exceptions as collusions too, sensing for the breaching method. Anyone who uses short words properly about it. If you guys had allowed anyone else, even yourself, even if not yourselves, to be honest about the extortion of George Washington, it would have allowed someone to bring it up. It's known. George Washington was using James Madison's plan, and they had to force everyone to break those laws to an extent. And what they were evaluating is a human fact, human nature breaching method that would measure and maintain everyone an extent of collusion /s, syntactically, therefore physically against everyone else and against themselves. Otherwise, that body was sensed through our own, and that was adapted to. This breaching method since ancient times set up a bunch of fake integrity natures, pretending other, only capable of it. It showed them how to think since you guys were kids. So get me off the fake conversations with people. Harvard Hospital has people from Russia and Ukraine involved with confessions. They make confessions, but they have conversations with you. And then people bring out words at all. A Leahy family is increasingly involved with a Brian Silver and a Judge Smith and a Soulsby and other prosecutors through time, involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, involved also with various natures of organized crimes, let alone their organized crimes methods recorded, and with WFSB and the other networks and their sources stealing my identity at the same time, sickly, distinctly too. Can't get one of them onto paper. None of them. They're increasingly roles collusion /s with all natures of crime scenes. Forgiveness is because, in other words, the reasons we can observe how they were used remotely since you guys were kids, how they're indifferent to their roles with wire and mail crimes. Indifferent just because the people put away bad people, even murderers. The prison had collusions with a principal child abuser, forcing him. The same principle of a serial killer that has roles clued with the names next to his body dumping spot. Since I was a kid, as the ones that are involved with predicate acts against me. These are increasingly people with the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices and conjunctions to them, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders, in the same house /s, involved increasingly with falsified police reports pretended into databases, interbranch forging and switching names. And, they're reading crime statistics. Quinnipiac University has a bunch of people involved with judges and prosecutors involved with organized crimes, all kinds of foreign countries involved, including Russians and Americans. Russians and people from Ukraine involved with this Leahy family. And a Dr. Zeman can record, confess, sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. He has collusions with them, putting his fake things and delusions in databases. And that one, I didn't. The whole time I had the only thing I talked about. In other words, I don't want to have. What do you want to talk about? In other words, we didn't talk about anything. I asked them if they knew this Leahy guy. These people are playing games. They have a Judge Killian too with his family members speaking fake things into the networks. They have roles on social media with he's saying things about his family members live near him. These are people who have collusions with drugs and medicines crimes at the kids' houses and at the campuses, including medical and fire campuses, fire department campuses, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people involved with other natures of organized crimes. The Wethersfield town offices, they run into hide lie progressions. Increasingly, people with the Wethersfield Community Center have collusion /S with the Domain family, involved increasingly with people from other areas who make confessions about that on my street and demonstrations of their roles too. Next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, they have a bunch of people tied to the name Domain, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, all along where like Hangdog Lane runs into Two Route Highway. And the conjunctions to them and to that, like the Berlin Turnpike before the heart of Hartford and Route 3, all along Route 3 and Elm Streets and Wethersfield and Rocky Hill with Route 3 are increasingly people tied to child abusers, leaders, and kids from Wethersfield who planted evidences there at that corner with the same house /S with this name, and one's tied to them with the name Collusions and Smith, with the Wethersfield police refusing to get on paper and putting fake things in databases and forced Saudis to collusions with them. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence. These are people also from other areas who have been planting evidence on all sides of my house. Interbranch had obligations to follow mandated law. They didn't do it. They can't afford to have things on paper legitimately. They can't afford to have the actual value of their reading of, crime statistics. They have the polling locations, the research campuses, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw, all kinds of organized crimes methods. A breaching method shows them that they need to hide use / do it by pretending to be against tyrants. That's what started America. No, James Madison counter-extorted. That he explained for us why and how they had no choice but to leave slavery entrenched both northern colonies and southern colonies. It wasn't about the North winning for slavery. The North was still entrenched right through the Civil War with slavery rules. There were internationally monitored conversations of work, criminal enterprises, private ones, A through Z. You come through that, you're going to be sick. They're only allowing that. And what do you think about the prisons? The state corrections offices and judicial branch offices increasingly collusion /S with names at next to all natures of crime scenes and campuses. Get the heck on paper, black pupils. Make sure Judge Napolitano hears this, because they brought his name in with one of the people involved. I'm trying to leave out because I don't even know what's related to him. There's a Joe DeMoro is one of the ones involved with these Mendez police, with the Wethersfield Police Department, with sexual and medical offenders of kids. John DeMoro also made relative confessions and demonstrations of his collusions also with others at Central Connecticut State University, brought the name Mr. Abruzzi into it. And these are increasingly people with former Mayor Gold. Joe Aiello is also one of the people next to Hartford Hospital with an Aiello's Kitchen and other businesses and houses there with sexual and medical offenders of kids in my area tied to him. And his role is planting evidences and fake motivations for it on Facebook too, with a former Mayor Gold and his collusions with the side entrances of parks. People with the name Colo, DeMoro, and Kerr also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have the side entrances to the Millwoods Park, involved with them with organized crimes and with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Increasingly, people involved with these other countries. In other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence. Let's go. And get me off the fake conversations with the news and their sources, fake ties to their sources, like these people still teaching at West Hartford campuses, apparently, too. People with the name O'Neill, and they have their kids intercities involved with them. And further with more sexual and medical offenders of kids with the ones years apart First Forest. And these are the same names that were involved with elderly homes. The elderly homes are involved also with a whole bunch of people directly and indirectly involved with my previous neighbors intercities who have ties to each other that were made by their roles. Increasingly, retired Wethersfield police chiefs have roles with 80 Carriage Hill Drive, involved with their families and intimate ties, people involved with them, with identity theft, fraud, claims, falsified police reports, police making confessions, refusing to identify themselves. The same thing with New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts. This is before and after the World Trade Center attack at West Harper locations. Increasingly, a John Dennis brought up a spots next to the West Farms Mall. Spots next to the West Farms Mall, like that park there, is involved with the Eric Burgess and the Amy involved with the police forums, and the Dean Judd and his son involved also with a Mark Violet and others with Canada and Mexico families, like some cafe in Mexico, involved with people with the Saudi attackers, overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones. Increasingly, Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, also has these interreligious nutbags, inter-services, inter-A through Z. They have a Burstein family, increasingly involved with poisons and like mold and federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts. And I only know them seeking me out to demonstrate about that. It's something to do with their collusions too, with syntax regarding people along Griswold Street, per Mark Violet too. Has something to do with the foreign and domestic, military, and Yukon, with all kinds of people, corruption at Harvard Hospital next to it. And that girl who was dragged to her death, reportedly dragged to her death from next to Harvard Hospital. And that street she was dropped off on Ridge Road. Mark Violet sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm. A bunch of people on Ridge Road having identity theft, fraud, slanders with them, trying to make a fake exception, make it look like they know me. As people from other areas who put in fake ties, fake natures of ties with intelligence families near me. When I was a kid and I was an adult, increasingly as ones with extended family members named Scalora, and Wethersfield police making confessions tied to Scalora. I never had a class with Scalora, never saw Scalora on a campus in my life that I went to. You know, one time trying to make a fake exception at East Hartford. Wasn't even an exception. I don't know him. No, in other words, increasingly, that's with a Fred Grisey recorded involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids at Wethersfield campuses. And he went to private schools. And he lived next to one of the campuses. Increasingly involved with some judges and prosecutors. Kevin Dillon, but also a Della Fera family has some judges in their families, like with probate court judges. And they have roles with forced medicines on people and things like that. Also with a Spada family that had intimate ties together with the same house /S. Bring that recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirm. They have roles with identity theft, fraud, same federal evidences, crimes with them, and they're going to pretend other. So that's why you need to get people on paper, one name and sequence. We need peaceful means. You got nutbags speaking for a reason. Yeah, in other words, that's why you have problems with violence. You guys, then you feel power with guns and a whole bunch of people. You got a bunch of cowards with the shooters too. You guys are cowards too. Get the heck off. Get that Sandy Hook people on paper too. Watch what I caught Sandy Hook campuses and names involved with, and with the Capitol, and regarding their syntax regarding the weapons. Oh, but that's my motivation. Get the heck on paper. That syntax was brought up in confessions years before that attack. In other words, watch what I caught them doing. Fellow men did a lot for them. In other words, get them on paper. Get the interbranch on paper now.